Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric, and I thought today we would kind of touch on a big debate this day and age of OEMs and aftermarkets and Chinese sellers, e-packets. What does all this mean to you, me, the shops, and the consumer, the customer? So, back when I was getting my bachelor's in IT, 2006, I did it not because I needed a degree. I did it to show my kids that you're never too old to go back and learn something. But while I was doing my bachelor's, um, I had a number of business courses that I had to also take, and I had one instructor. I gave a lot more respect to the instructor that actually had been out there, and ran companies and stuff, versus someone that just was book smart and was reading you something. But he was way up in an eyeglass company. It was Bosch and Lomb. And he saw the headwind back then, and we talked about it numerous times in class. And I would say, that's when these companies started setting up shop in China, and Mexico was the other one, those two locations, because it did a few things. It got them outside the regulations so that they didn't have strict EPA and a bunch of other regulations of employees and so on. I mean, it's hard to be a company in the U.S. That's the end answer, period. And what they found was if they went to China, which was not a friendly nation to us at all, or Mexico, which doesn't look like they're that friendly that time with the cartels and stuff, that they could get away with more. They could get cheaper labor. They could make a product that didn't have to meet certain standards. And then they could ship it by container from China or by rail or truck from Mexico and sell it here in the U.S. as OEMs. I didn't say aftermarkets, OEMs. The only thing I had to say on it was somewhere I had to say made in China. Most times it was on the bag that it was sealed in. It wasn't on the individual part. But he and I talked about that, and I said, it's going to catch up to him, because my theory on it back then is if you move all the manufacturing out of the U.S., you just lost all those jobs for people that are here. How are they going to be able to afford your product if they're not working? And all you're helping is other countries lift themselves up while you're depressing your own people. And it was all dollars and cents. That's where it came down to. And he said, I agree. Because one of his jobs towards the end, and he hated it, was going in and axing companies that they had and transferring all their processing, their manufacturing overseas. And at that time, even people that were, doing stuff in the manufacturing were teaching the Chinese and the Mexicans how to operate the machinery to build these products. It's kind of like phases, but I can remember when I was young and everybody was all hyped up about everything coming in from Japan and how it was going to be the demise of the world, and it wasn't. They didn't have a big controlling market, and it was their own stuff that they were bringing in. It wasn't our companies going there and shipping stuff back. So what ended up happening anyways was a lot of these manufacturers started manufacturing. They China was more than willing to let them build plants and bring their equipment and everything else, all their technology, to them. And these companies were stupid enough to think that China wouldn't have any say in anything. In China, see, nobody in China owns squat. It's all held by the state. This is a communist country. We're a capitalist country that, in a sense, that you can, if you work hard enough and smart enough, you can get ahead. And you can own things. And you have a lot more freedoms. You can speak out whenever you want to speak out. But we let all of our manufacturing go in these two different places. But the way it started is one manufacturer moved their manufacturing to China. And the rest of them that were manufacturing, competing against that product, could no longer compete on the same ground, because the ones that had moved to China had fewer regulations and they had more freedoms to do what they wanted to make a cheaper product, and they had cheap labor, whereas the ones that were still a foothold here in the US had employees here manufacturing. The employees costed a lot more money. The regulations were, and they had no choice. So it was like a domino effect. After the first one went, then the second one, then the third one, and then as you can see how it went. And next thing you know, they're all over there competing on the same ground. And then the companies started crying foul when China took their technology, their parts they were producing, and started making sister plants producing the same part, the same specs, same equipment under a Chinese no-name brand. And those soon became called aftermarket parts. China was taking the manufacturer's ideas, thoughts, and technology and setting it shop next door and selling it under a no-name brand, which now we all know are aftermarket parts. So the big debate about, is the OEM or aftermarket part better? Which is, a lot of guys say, well, the OEM one is because it's held to a higher standard. It might be a little bit in China, but for the most part, it is what it is. They're both coming from China. They're both coming from the same equipment and the same processing. There's no difference except price. And then when it came to the OEM and the aftermarket, what China was doing was they had to have a way to get into the US. So a lot of these aftermarket companies started springing up. And they were buying these parts and warehousing and under different names. Like you have Rotary, Stens, this is just two that I know of. And China was happy because they were selling products in the same marketplace as the manufacturers that had built the plants competing against equally. And then came the third phase. The third phase was China cut out the manufacturer and the aftermarket and started shipping directly to the consumer with e-packets. And if you do any research on e-packets is something that was set up, but we're paying for those postage on e-packets every time one of the Chinese sellers sells it this way. And it's still, that seller is not making money, it's the state that's making money. So now China took and cut out the manufacturer, because they're still there, but they started selling to aftermarket companies. And then from there, they started selling directly to the consumers that were buying the product from the aftermarket and the manufacturer OEMs. You see where I'm going with this? So all three are the same, and it's the same one, China, that undermined each one of them to what we have today. Good or bad, that's just the way it is. And for someone to sit there and say that one is better than the other, I don't see it. Maybe the quality might be a little bit less in the aftermarket and the e-packet ones than what the OEMs are being produced in the plants in China and Mexico. But I'm not seeing it. Some of them have got, they say, well, they got adjustable jets on them. Well, the ones that are coming through now, the carburetors I'm seeing for chainsaws and weed eaters have adjustable jets. But the EPA doesn't want you to be adjusting your equipment if you're a consumer. They want the shops doing it for emissions. So the tool to adjust it is illegal to sell in the U.S. unless it's to a shop owner. So the moral of the story is, I've said it on numerous videos. Be totally honest with your customer. You don't have to tell them this whole story. But if you tell them that, here's the price for an OEM, here's the price for an aftermarket, here's the price for an e-packet right from China, which one do you want? Most chances are the customer is going to go with the cheapest way out, even if it doesn't last that long. And some of you guys have posted, to my videos, it's the disposable generation. It is, really, because people aren't keeping stuff around. They run it until it dies, and then they go get another one instead of fixing what they got. All right, guys. That's my politics for today. Hope you have a great day.